In 2025, young people across Nepal led what has now been known as the Gen Z protests, an entire generation that attempted to protest for their future and against censorship was met with brutality by the Nepali government, which raised serious human rights concerns. Prior to the protests, Nepali youth began to discuss the rampant corruption in Nepal's government across various social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp, X, formerly known as Twitter, WeChat, and Line. Using the hashtag #NepoBaby, those across the country began to call attention to the lavish lifestyles that politicians and their families experienced, while the rest of the nation had to fight against rampant corruption, unemployment, and human capital flight. In response, the Nepali government implemented a social media ban affecting 26 social media platforms on September 4, 2025. In response to the social media ban, young Nepalis began to develop a plan to protest the government's suppression of speech. Fuel to the fire was added on September 6, 2025, when a provisional minister's vehicle hit an 11-year-old girl on the outskirts of Kathmandu. According to reports, the driver did not stop to check to make sure the girl was okay. Prime Minister Sharma Oli later came out with a statement saying the accident was normal and urged the public not to politicize it. 2 days later, on September 8, 2025, the Gen Z protests officially broke out in the nation's capital. Protesters began to gather in the early morning at Maitikar Mandala, a symbolic monument located in the middle of the nation's capital. Many high school and college-aged students wore their uniforms, some carried banners reading "Youth Against Corruption," and others waved flags from the anime One Piece. The state responded to the Gen Z protests in one of the most severe episodes of violence against civilians in Nepal's democratic era. At 11:38 a.m., protesters breached police barricades, and security forces responded by deploying water cannons. They soon followed this up with tear gas only 15 minutes later. By 12:08 p.m., around 20 individuals had climbed the main gates of the federal parliament. The Kathmandu District Administration Office imposed a curfew in New Bhubaneswar and surrounding areas at 12:30 p.m. Only 7 minutes later, police began to shoot protesters who had climbed onto the terrace of a small building near the parliament gate. At 1:20 p.m., a journalist for Naya Patrika was shot by police while reporting on the protests. As more and more protesters began to be killed or injured, they were transported to the Civil Service Hospital, which was raided by police who fired tear gas inside the compound at 3 p.m. The extent of the casualties for the day were not revealed until 5 p.m., when officials claimed 19 protesters were killed and more than 100 injured. By the end of the day, Home Minister Ramesh Lekik resigned. Communications Minister Prithvi Subba Gaurang announced the lifting of the social media ban. Curfews were expanded, and the army was placed on standby as unrest spread to other cities overnight. The following day, hundreds of buildings were set on fire, including former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuva's residence, offices of the Nepali Congress and CPN-UML, former Prime Minister Oli's private residence in Balkot, General Secretary of the Nepali Congress Gagan Tapa's house, the Department of Transport Management, the Supreme Court, the Maoist Party headquarters at Paris Donda, the District Court and Special Court, the Sigha Dorbar Palace in Kathmandu. Security forces confronted protesters in Kathmandu using tear gas, rubber bullets, water cannons, and live ammunition, which led to the protesters responding with violence of their own. According to Human Rights Watch, security forces in Nepal used disproportionate force against youth-led protests on September 8th, indiscriminately firing on protesters multiple times. The state of Nepal has now been criticized for committing unlawful killings, their use of unnecessary and excessive force, and causing severe injuries to hundreds of people. Reports found that water cannons, tear gas, and kinetic impact projectiles such as rubber bullets were used recklessly, resulting in fatal wounds and permanent disabilities. The use of excessive and reckless force violated UN basic principles on the use of force and firearms requirements for necessary and proportionate force. Several videos and photos captured officers firing FN/FAL rifles, which have been found to have no legitimate use in policing protests. Ultimately, 17 people were killed during the demonstration, with the total death rising to 76 people once tension settled. Of those people, 10 were prisoners who were shot to prevent their escape from Central Jail Sudhara. According to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, to freedom of peaceful assembly and association, and to take part in the government of their country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. Both Article 19 and Article 20 were directly infringed upon during the protests, but Article 21 is one of the main grievances which prompted the protests to begin. The UN upholds standards for governments, emphasizing a legal duty to allow peaceful protests and prevent cruel or inhumane treatment. When the state uses force during a protest, it shifts away from protecting its people and towards managing or suppressing them. This can be better understood through the concept of biopower, the way governments regulate and control human life. Additionally, necropolitics, as described by historian Achille Mbembe, is the process of the state deciding who gets to live and who will die. When security forces use deadly force on people who are exercising their basic rights, that power becomes apparent. Similarly, the process of dehumanizing protesters through threat-based treatment allows authorities to use force against them with greater ease. If unlawful killings, excessive force, and repression occur without accountability, it signals that the state is operating above the law. The use of lethal force against protesters results in a major violation of human rights. Human rights protections are also extended to journalists who are covering the actions unfolding around them. Under the Geneva Conventions, journalists who are not accredited with the armed forces have the status of civilians and are to be protected as such. The fight against censorship and corruption by an entire generation ended in multiple deaths and injuries, while their basic rights received no protection. The state's application of excessive force demonstrates how quickly administrative authority can transform into oppressive authority. The Gen Z protest functions as a warning. Peaceful demonstrations that are met with brutality result in both human rights violations and the complete destruction of human rights.